and today we're touching in on impact, how to measure impact and impact strategies.
Yeah.
And Camilla, you've been putting the agenda together for today, so can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. We've got some great speakers for you today and are very much looking forward to today's discussion. First out is Maria, who is Partner and Chief Impact Officer at Norslab, in addition to being the Chair of the Board at the recently established NorNAB. After Maria, we have Daniel, who is Head of Investor Relations and Impact at World Fund, and Floriane, who is Senior ESG Analyst at SWEN Capital Partners. Feel free to ask questions both in the room and in the chat, but note that the seminar will be recorded and published on NVCA's YouTube channel. Also, the list of participants will be shared with today's speakers, so if you prefer not to be on this list, please let us know.
And also it's a hybrid seminar, so Maria is here with us, and Danielle and Floriane will attend on the screen. But for you being here, just raise your hands, and for you attending digitally, you raise your digital hand, and we will make sure they will get the questions after the presentations. So enjoy, Maria.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning, although I think for many of us it's a bit early still. I just literally had my first cup of coffee 3 minutes ago. But I'll try to excite you with this material that I have to present today. I'm here on behalf of NorNAB, the Norwegian National Advisory Board for Impact Investing. And although you so nicely credited me for being the chair of the NorNAB, I am actually not. I am a board member. Our chair is Espen Doe from FARD. Just to get that straight. In my daily work, I am a partner and chief officer at Norslab, an Oslo-based investment house dedicated to developing attractive impact investment offerings across asset classes. So this is the reason why we are part of NorNAB and I am on the board, and I hopefully can add some value to this survey that we have to present today. Before I dive into the topic, I would like to introduce NorNAB and our mission quite briefly. NorNAB is an independent membership association working for the growth and development of the impact ecosystem in Norway. We aim to help increase capital flow to impact investments, both nationally and internationally, to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the NAB was established officially earlier this year, and we've also officially been taken into the GSG, the Global Steering Group for Impact Investing. But this is, I would say, a result of several years of reflection from multiple players here in Norway who have been really working on this idea and how to get it off the ground. And I would also just like to say that we have Frida here, who's been you would say in Norwegian, a primus motor, so kind of the driving force behind the establishment of the NAB, kind of really getting all the pieces together and getting it off the ground. So feel free also to speak with her if you're curious about what the NAB does. We have 25 members to date, and we expect to be around 50 next year. I would also just like to mention that we're currently recruiting a CEO. So just a note for anyone who knows anyone who would be a great representative of impact investing. What else to say about the NAB? I think it's really important to emphasize that the organization is open for anyone who has an interest in impact investing. So it's not like a closed thing where we will ask you to comply with a certain number of commitments or where we will add a layer of reporting. It's really a place where you can come to learn and grow, no matter kind of where you are on the scale of impact investing. Whether you're just starting, you're just curious, or whether you're very advanced. The survey that I'm presenting today is one of two key initiatives that the NAB has decided to go forward with. So I will say a bit more about the survey in a second because it's why we're here. But I also want to mention that we're currently working on a guide to impact investing. It's something that we will always also find today, that people are a little bit seeking for more guidance on how to do impact investing. And so the NAB has given itself the mission to try and kind of sort it out a little bit for people and make it easier and more accessible, and also adapt it to the Norwegian market. Oh yeah, I have these faces here. I think it's just nice for you to see them. This is the current board of NorNAB, where you have several of the organizations that initiated the NorNAB, but not all of them. I guess for many of you, very familiar faces, but we have representatives from FAD, Katapult, Nysnø, Grieg, Norslab, so myself, and Norfund. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting to our topic in just a second. First, some preliminary remarks about the survey itself. It's the first of its kind. It's never been done before in Norway. It's already been done elsewhere in Europe and in the world to try and size the impact investing market and to kind of gain more insights into the broader impact investing market. So this is really a milestone for the Norwegian ecosystem. It's also a very important starting point for tracking the developments in the market, and it will provide very valuable insights to NorNAB's strategy process that we're currently working on. And Frida, you may be able to answer this, but the comprehensive version of the study will be published sometime this week. I don't know if we have an ETA for that.
In the next few days.
In the next few days. So that's actually an invitation to go straight to LinkedIn and to look for NorNAB and to follow, because then you will be sure to have this study in your feed. Okay, let's get to this. When we talk about impact investments, what do we mean? We know that a lot of people interpret it in different ways. But when we talk about impact investing in the NorNAB, we use the GIN, so the Global Impact Investing Network. We use their definition of impact investments. So I just want to highlight some words in this definition. I'm going to read it to you. Impact investments are investments made with the intention to generate positive, measurable social and environmental impact alongside a financial return. We know that people out there think that impact investments are something akin to philanthropy. And there is still some disagreement to this, but as the NAB, we use this definition where we really tie impact investments, the term, to also the idea that you should have a financial return. The GIN, which is really the authority in the field internationally, has estimated the global impact investing market to $1.164 trillion US. So this was based on direct investments at the end of 2021. And I believe there is an updated number that it's slightly higher, and the GIN is tracking this, I think, on an annual basis right now. And what we see is that there has been a tremendous growth in the impact investing market globally these past 5 years. But then we also know that there has been a number of events on the macro level that has also impacted how it's going with impact investments, but also, I would say, investments in general. A bit more about the survey. We sent this survey out to 130 organizations in the Norwegian financial ecosystem. So since we didn't have a database of impact investors, we identified local entities involved in or likely to pursue impact investing in some way. So this was the basis for the survey. We had 39 organizations responding. Out of these, 26 or 2/3 state that they engage in impact investing according to the definition that we just read together. And among these, 17 reported their direct impact AUM numbers. But we shouldn't forget about the remaining sample, because we did actually ask the ones that don't engage in impact investing a couple of questions before they were kindly asked to lead the survey. And we have some learnings from that as well. So these numbers may seem pretty small, and it is definitely not an exhaustive or fully representative survey for all impact investing in Norway. But we do believe that this survey provides some good indications about the state of impact investing in Norway. So now let's go to it. And you know what? I'm going to give you the headline right away. Because the size of the Norwegian impact investing market is over 100 billion NOK. Ta-da. Who expected that? Everyone expected that, or are you surprised? Oh. I just like to highlight that this includes development finance institutions, and without those, the number is 77 billion NOK, and I'll tell you in a moment why that is an important distinction. I think what's interesting with this number, because when I asked you whether you were surprised, I think that's actually a hard question, because when you don't have any context, how do you know how much it is? And we tried to compare the Norwegian share of impact investing to what's happening in Europe. And for this, we will use the 77 billion NOK number, so excluding development finance institutions, because that is also the basis that the European Venture Philanthropy Association and the GSG has used in a comparable study on the European market that did not include Norway. So, what is very clear in our findings is that Norway punches above its weight. So in Europe, the corresponding number is 900 billion NOK. And that means that Norway, with its 5.5 million people, actually represents or contributes 8.5% of impact AUM in Europe. So I think, although that's a kind of a tap on the shoulder maybe to ourselves, it doesn't mean that we necessarily have to, stop there. I think we really have a role that we can take on, and we have some really interesting indicators also of growth in the market. So all reasons to remain very optimistic. We might ask what types of investors engage in impact investing. And in the survey sample that we had, which is, as I said, of course not exhaustive, there is clear overweight of fund managers and family offices. And then we have a nice little selection of other types of organizations in the remaining sample. We hope that this will be more interesting as we move forward and as we also conduct the next survey on the market. What is also very clear is that Norwegian impact investors have both a global and a local perspective. We know that out of the ones that define themselves as impact investors in this survey, 52% invest both in Norway and abroad. we have 29% that only invest in Norway, and we have 19% that only invest abroad. And if we look at the ones that invest abroad, there is also a nice spread. You have about a third that are involved in investments on the African continent, and another third that's direct investments towards North America. And the third share there is they are engaged in investments in Asia. So really a global footprint of these impact investors here in Norway. And let's move on to see what types of impacts these investors are intentionally looking for. Okay, not collaborating. I think I need some technical help because it's oh, it's coming. Okay, where were I? Yeah, there. Good. What is a key finding is that environmental impact is something that really seems well understood and that everyone adheres to. We believe it has something to do with the rising attention and momentum around climate, which at the end of the day is something that is easier to understand, as opposed to, for instance, social impact, where we see that the share of impact investors who engage is slightly lower. And we think that there is, to date, less clarity in the market as to what social impact means. But we also believe that this is something that will mature over time and be better understood over time, and that potentially also regulation can help us better understand what this means. I'd also just like to highlight that there are no investors in Norway, or impact investors, just to be precise, that are part of this study that focus only on social impact. So this obviously also reflects in the SDGs that are targeted. So the top three are number 13, climate action, number 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, and 7, that relates to affordable and clean energy. And this also overlaps really well with what the impact investors in the survey state that they target in terms of investment themes, where climate, energy and circular economy are the top 3. Another finding is that in general, we also see that there is, although environmental is kind of high on the agenda, there is, among most of the respondents in the survey, also a broad understanding of impact and sustainability. And fewer respondents have a very narrow thematic approach. Okay, let's look a little bit on the things that people say that they need for growing their impact investments, or for engaging with impact investments. And the organizations that do engage with impact investing today were asked the following question. How important are the following factors for growth in the impact investing sector, on a scale from not important to very important? And the top 3 here are pretty clear. One concern that they have is around suitable exit options. So actually, maybe they want to invest, but what do they do then afterwards, right? How do they actually exit the companies that they invest in? They also state that high quality investment opportunities with a track record is a concern. And the third point that really stands out is that they believe they need more in-house impact skills or expertise. And I think this just speaks to kind of one overall takeaway that we have from this survey, which is that there is a lot happening in the Norwegian ecosystem, a lot of willingness to go into impact, but there is still immaturity in impact investing, right? It's still a fairly new activity, although we know it goes back to 2007 when the term was coined. And I think all these reasons that are stated really relate to the fact that it's still I've heard some people characterize impact investing as a teenager. I think it's pretty describing in some way, because you don't have that track record. You haven't really realized still how much competence you need in this field. And of course you have no track record, because few have invested for a long time and can really show that it also brings returns. How am I on time? Am I okay? Yeah, okay, I'm wrapping up. Thank you. There is a quote here that I think also is a little bit describing from one of the respondents in the survey, saying Norwegian investors sometimes tend to be a bit traditional, preferring to put money into assets they know well. How to clarify the framework around the investment opportunities. So that's a call to action for us at NorNAB and also to all of you engaging in impact investing. And then, if I may, I have a few last things that I want to share with you. This is a really important one. We asked respondents whether they see a trade-off between impact and financial returns. And I think all in this room would be surprised to hear that 95% of the organizations that do engage in impact investing see no trade-off between impact and financial return. And almost half of the respondents here even say that impact investing can lead to greater returns than traditional investments. And there is a quote that I want to highlight that also came from one of the respondents. Change the narrative that you must sacrifice financial return to achieve impact. And we know there is growing appetite. Just a quick couple of numbers here. 50% of the respondents that are engaged in impact investing today plan to increase their share of impact investments. And 45% plan to maintain their share. But I'd like to highlight something there. 25% of these are already fully invested in impact, so they cannot increase their share. However, what they can do is to increase their AUM, which will, of course, grow the markets. And here is a final number for the road, and then I'll wrap it up. We said that we also try to get a little bit something out of the ones that are not engaged in impact investing today. And actually 33% of them plan to engage with impact investing in the near future. So that's yet another indicator that the Norwegian impact market will grow. And if I may just summarize for all of you here today, there is serious momentum for Norwegian impact investing. Remember the number, 100 billion NOK already dedicated to impact. The question is, can we punch even more above our weight? Can we keep up with Europe, and can we outperform Europe in doing impact investing? And there is high confidence in the financial opportunity in impact investing. And we know that there are things that we need to do as an ecosystem to have more people come on board with impact investing. Lastly, I just want to thank Deloitte, who has been helping us carry out this survey, and to all of the people that have been active in making this survey possible. And at NorNAB, we believe the ecosystem has an unprecedented opportunity, an opportunity we aim to help the entire ecosystem to see through the work of both NorNAB ourselves and the individual organizations engaged in impact. We are very excited and hopeful for the road ahead. Thank you.
I'm happy to basically pick up exactly where we left the previous presentation and tell you a little bit about how we think about climate performance potential and assessing basically climate solutions. So to briefly start with the context, where we are right now in Europe, we in the last year, we have seen 19.6 trillion euros of AUM overall in EU investment funds. So quite a large number. If we zoom into climate technology related AUM, we see that 19.6 billion euros have been invested in climate tech. So it's 0.1% of this large figure. And if we look at this is a study by Dina, how much we would actually need to invest into climate technologies for the transition, we would see that we fall massively short. We need to invest 1 trillion per annum until 2030 to reach our climate goals, which we're falling extremely short on. On a global scale, this Bloomberg study finds a similar order of magnitude, where we actually massively need to increase the funding to get to net zero by 2050. And if we look at basically what these climate technologies are, if we look at our deal flow, we still see that there's a lot of e-scooter type of technologies, delivery services, and we even recently got a sustainable pizza company. And obviously this is problematic as these are not the key decarbonization technologies. In fact, if we look at venture capital and how it has been deployed in climate tech over the last years, we see that actually there's a mismatch between the emissions challenge and where it's being deployed, with 85% of the emissions receiving only 52% of the funding. And these are across these 5 different sectors of mobility, energy, built environment, food and agriculture, and industry. So venture capital has an important role to play here. If we look at R&D, there's 35% of the budgets going into climate, and there's like an open pool of capital that I was actually interested in on the private equity and on the growth side to invest into climate technologies, and we need to bridge that gap on the VC side, particularly because we see by this study of the International Energy Agency that actually 46% of technologies needed for decarbonizing our economy until 2050 will need to come from technologies that are today at development stage, and half of them of technologies at market stage. So there's a big need for the transition to do this. And if we look at where this R&D is actually coming from, we see that Europe's actually perfectly destined to bridge that commercialization gap. And we also see that in climate tech, performance of VCPE has been already completely different from what we saw in the clean tech 1.0 bubble. This data is by Cambridge Associates, can be looked on their website. So in summary, there's a funding gap in European climate tech. Europe, in fact, leads with patents and startups and the overall kind of like R&D landscape. And the performance is also significantly improving on VC side. But interestingly, there's much more to it. There's actually also, if you look at public markets, you can analyze how climate decarbonization and similar kind of mechanisms are actually affecting performance. And we've actually summarized this or outlined and done all this research together with PwC and Clean Tech Group Europe, and put this all in a white paper if you're interested in kind of like getting more nuances of that basically of that whole transition, and basically trying to change the narrative between impact and climate investing and what it means for financial returns. Because in fact, with what we've shown in this research, there's actually the case that climate performance potential is a leading indicator. So basically a predictor for financial return, and not something that needs to be done only for philanthropic reasons. And so the question begs, how should we go about it in a way that actually helps us to drive the returns in our portfolio, to actually help us pick the winners of this transformation, the probably largest transformation our economy has ever seen. So when we started Worldfund a few years back, we had a game plan that we wanted to work with the leading experts and scientists in the field and find the best methodology and apply it in our portfolio and in our investment process. And so this was basically the paper that I initially wrote, and we used this as a discussion basis to basically reach out to almost 100 experts from the financial side, from the scientific side, and also from the policy side, and try to see what is out there, what can we use, what can we build on to actually develop and to actually apply to our investment process. And we found quite unfortunately that in the market there was really nothing out there that could be used kind of out of the box or even like somewhat aligned principles to invest into startup companies. All solutions that we found were either overly complex because it's a very, very complex issue. So that's something also to acknowledge. Or they were very enterprise focused, meaning if you had established supply chains, etc., it would be applicable for that if you have a lot of primary data. And lastly, if these solutions were focused on kind of ex post and footprinting, so looking into the past and not into the future as we want to do. So with that, we need to go back to our game plan and basically update, find the best methodology to basically, we need to develop our own methodology that we can start to apply to our investment process. And with regards to these problems that we found, we tried to address them by basically trying to develop something that is pragmatic and effective, that can be used in the fast living nature of an investment process. We want to find something that is focused on startups with little primary data, very data sparse environments, and that is also fit for kind of like this future looking, so what you call ex ante fits, and also for how we as VCs think about the topic. And all of this should be guided by the question, how can we leverage the highest quality science that is out there? Because science ultimately still is the best tool that we have to basically develop, to decide this kind of like which are impactful solutions and which are not, because it's a physical problem after all. So with regards to pragmatic and effective, we have decided that it is a very multidimensional problem, but we need to focus on one. We need to focus on one, quantifying one dimension, which helps us to have better data availability, helps us to have better benchmarking abilities, etc. And so we focus for us on emissions reduction potential. It's also a very strong proxy for climate change, but this can be obviously different for different funds, for different theses, for different sectors. But for us, it has been the emissions reduction potential that we then want to quantify up into the future until 2040 to see, are we talking about a key decarbonization driver? But then that we also want to acknowledge that there is different dimensions that are all ultimately interrelated. So if you have, significant negative impact on biodiversity, on social dimensions, on water health, water use or ocean health, you will ultimately impact the emissions reduction potential and create a problem for the future. So this is something that we want to assess, but on a qualitative as opposed to quantitative nature. And we do this for every company. And we have also a governing theory of change that is basically called our regenerative vision for the future. And we always want to make sure that these technologies we invest in actually embed into that regenerative vision, into that future, because we have a big responsibility as VCs. There's always these studies in terms of like how much of today's economy has been actually backed by VCs. So we have the responsibility of creating solutions that truly will make a better future. And lastly, this should be kind of like knit into an overall theory of change that is consistent with consistent assumptions and consistent logic across the portfolio. So with regards to the startup focus, what does this mean? So if we look at the typical supply chain of a startup, so on the left-hand side, you see kind of like the duct tape and Alibaba typical supply chain of particularly early stage startups, right? You have suppliers that change every year. You have a products that are still changing. So that's kind of a very tricky environment to maneuver. Whereas on the other side, you have kind of the highest data quality, which will be peer-reviewed studies. So what we typically try to do is to focus really on the scientific literature, and even if it's only a proxy for what the company is doing, and then use the company's data to actually triangulate the scientific data and overall base our decision much more on the scientific data as opposed to the primary data of the company. Lastly, the ex ante and VC fit. What does this mean for us? So we need to look into the future. I'm sure everyone is familiar with kind of like the typical sales forecasts that every company sends an investor, which is obviously what you could call kind of like lowest possible data quality. So that's obviously not something you want to trust. But there's good news that there actually exists a more validated model, and that is these S curves that have been shown to basically where all major innovative technologies have been shown to actually follow an S curve like this in terms of market penetration when they came to market. And these can be parameterized by 3 parameters. So it's not, it's something quite doable and gives you something of much, much higher validity than if you were to rely on the company data. And it would give you also in the end something, how we really like to think about impact potential, something like the total addressable market. So that's the total kind of like bucket that a company is playing in. And then we want to go and kind of like find the winning team, the best team that will actually deliver best in that bucket. And so we kind of do it almost more on a technology level and a little bit less on a company level because the data is of too low validity there. So with regards to our game plan, we then wanted to start and apply and kind of learn from what happens if we apply this methodology to certain companies. And I can give you, I brought one example of Planet A Foods. It's an alternative cacao company that does precision fermented cacao powder and cacao butter, which is a very problematic industry but that is completely locally sourced in a B2B fashion. And how we have approached this, basically, we've done kind of our literature research and combined it with their assessments of ingredients and energy resources, etc., across the different life cycle phases of the company and comparing it with traditional cacao and their product, their cacao powder, coa, they were called at the time, as well as coa butter. And one interesting concept that I think is important for impact investors is to really focus on the materiality, meaning where do we see a material performance, and where we don't see it, for example, in transport, use, end of life, we really just null it and say, okay, let's not, with every variable that we introduce, we increase kind of error, right? So we try to only focus on the material ones, and then we get a good understanding of what's happening. So, and then this is just one part of the assessment. So if we actually look at the regenerative fit and generally competing pathways to decarbonizing, we see that regenerative agriculture is actually a much better solution. If we could get the entire cacao supply chains towards regenerative, that would be the best solution because we kind of like sequester carbon, have local jobs, etc. But we have looked at kind of the numbers, and it just seems absolutely impossible that within the time horizon that we look at until 2040, there'll be any chance of actually transitioning fast enough. So there's 5 to 6% of premium market today that includes regenerative agriculture, and the rest of the market is growing quite aggressively. And so it was really important for our assessment to make sure that Planet A Foods is only targeting and only displacing the cheapest, chocolate products, and which they are doing at a cheaper price point, at less supply chain risk, etc. So they're only displacing cacao from West Africa and Indonesia, which is kind of like 90% of the mass market, where there's deforestation of rainforests, and then there is full sun monocultural systems being planted on there, which has a massively negative impact. And then they actually are supporting regenerative projects themselves. So this kind of was an important distinction for us to make before we invest in such a company. And then only then we can attribute the impact that they have. And in this assessment, we got to 160 megatons per annum by 2040 of annual emissions reductions. This is the outline of every assessment that we do. So it always focuses on the potential, so the emissions challenge, the climate performance of the product, the climate performance potential assessment. And then there is additionality, there's risks that also need to be analyzed. So it's quite an important work for us to make sure that this is a technology that will win in the climate transformation and significantly contribute. And we had from the start kind of like a last step in our game plan that is basically beyond our own impact practice and applying it to ourselves. We actually believe that there will be an entire set of instruments, similar like in the financial world, of non-financial instruments for managing and measuring impact. And so we actually want to contribute and be at the forefront of shaping how the standards and best practices will look like. And so I fully recommend you have a look at Project Frame. We've partnered with Prime Coalition, who's convening Frame. You see a picture on the right-hand side where we basically announced that. And Project Frame is the leading kind of association of impact investors actually developing best practices and standards for forward-looking impact assessments. And the best paper that you can look at in terms of forward-looking impact assessments is the pre-investment considerations of Project Frame. So I highly recommend that. We have been founding members of the Venture Climate Alliance, which basically is not for impact investors, but for all VC investors, defining what does net zero mean for venture and how does it tie into kind of like GFANs and the larger net zero alliances. And then lastly, it has been extremely important to me that we stay actually really close and grounded within the scientific community, given that kind of like impact assessments are a little bit like of a Wild West these days. So I'm really proud that last month we've actually had a paper by the Technical University Berlin published that assessed our methodology and put it into the scientific context, basically saying, is this like what does this mean in everything that we know and everything that has been introduced already? And this is basically the paper that introduces climate performance potential into the scientific community, where it can be then used as a terminology and further studies. And yes, that's our thoughts on impact assessments. And I think there's time for questions after the next talk. So I'll stop screen sharing for now.
But now we will welcome Floriane, our last speaker for today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm Floriane Lafore. I'm a senior ESG analyst at SWEN Capital Partners, and I'm very happy to be with you virtually today. So to begin with, a few words about SWEN Capital Partners. We're a French asset manager. We're around 8 billion euros in the management. We're investing in private equity, infrastructure, and private debt. And we have two main institutional shareholders. Since our beginning, we've always had a strong focus on ESG and responsible investing. For example, we are doing an annual ESG data collection for more than 10 years now. And I'm part of an internal team of 9 professionals in the ESG team, which corresponds to around 10% of SWEN's total headcount. Earlier this year, we updated our sustainable finance policy, which historically included a climate policy. But this year, we wanted to introduce and include the biodiversity topic because we think that it's more and more important. And after careful consideration, we actually thought that it made more sense to combine the two and actually release a nature policy that includes the climate and biodiversity related issues, because we actually believe that those issues cannot and should not be addressed separately. This is because, well, climate change affects biodiversity, and biodiversity also plays a crucial role in climate regulation. So there are a lot of links and feedback loops between the two. You can have a look at the nature policy on our website because it's available online, but just to give you a quick overview, it has 3 engagement pillars. The first one is to adhere to international frameworks, which are basically the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the Paris Agreement Framework. And we want to conduct our policy at a strategic level. So we built a whole governance to make sure that we stick to our commitments. Then the second engagement pillar is that we commit to contribute to ecosystem regeneration by factoring nature-related issues into all our investment decisions. So to do so, we believe that the first step is to understand where we are in order to act. So this means trying to measure annually our impacts and dependencies on nature qualitatively and as much as possible quantitatively. It also means that we want to mitigate adverse impacts and support the transition of economic activities. And the last step will be to create solutions towards restoration and conservation. And then the last pillar is to help our stakeholders incorporate nature-related issues into their activities. And by stakeholders, we mean several things. First, our staff and our governance bodies. So we plan to train everyone at SWEN Capital Partners about those issues. We also want to support and raise awareness among portfolio companies, among partner funds, because we also invest in funds, so indirectly, and support our clients. So this can be made through webinars, for instance. This can be made thanks to being more transparent in our reports about those topics, for instance. And of course, this is all a work in progress and just beginning. And then the last point is about participating in market initiatives and the methodology working groups to be aware of what's going on and to contribute to building the global initiatives. Then to be a bit more concrete, I'd like to introduce our fund, which is called Blue Ocean. Blue Ocean is a venture capital impact fund that is investing in the regeneration of ocean health through innovation. This is a fund that is classified as Article 9 under SFDR, and it aims to invest in 3 verticals. The first one is to invest in solutions to ocean overexploitation. Could be sustainable aquaculture, alternative seafood, for instance. The second pillar or vertical is investing in solutions to marine pollutions. By marine pollutions, we mean plastic, of course, but we also mean all other kinds of pollution that can be found in the ocean. And lastly, the third vertical is the marine solutions to climate change. And by that, we mean, for instance, that we aim at finding solutions to decarbonize shipping, but also solutions linked to marine renewable energy, for instance. And What is very important for us in building this strategy was to have a scientific partnership. And we have one with IFREMER, which is the leading French ocean research institute. And it helps us at every stage of the investment, making sure that our investments are in line with science. We built our own impact doctrine, which is our methodology, and it's aligned, of course, with the GENE, for instance, with 3 pillars of intentionality, additionality, and measurement. And I'm not going to describe everything, but maybe highlight some key elements that can be found in our investment process. For instance, at the start of the analysis of a potential investment, we try to see if we can build an impact thesis that can demonstrate a net positive impact on the ocean. That is on at least one of the 3 verticals that I just presented. And also what is key for us is to be able to demonstrate no significant harm beyond the ocean. And we have an independent impact committee that assesses each of those impact theses before any investment or pre-investment committee is held. Another key step for us happens after investment. We work closely with the investee companies to define impact KPIs for each investment, among which some will be used for the carried interest, because 50% of the carried interest of the fund is subject to achieving impact KPI targets. So there is a deep work about this after investment with the ESG team, the impact team, the investment team, and the management team of the investee company to make sure that we agree on KPIs that make sense for everyone. And also then we define annual targets that are at the last step validated by our impact governance committee, which is composed of some of the limited partners of the fund. Now, to be even a bit more concrete, I'd like to talk to you about 2 concrete examples of startups that we invested in with the fund. So the first one is called EcoSubsea, and it's a Norwegian company that has developed a system to inspect, monitor, clean, and collect biofouling on ship hulls. So biofouling, for those who might not know, is the accumulation of microorganisms, plants, algae, animals on the hulls of the ships. And it has 2 key negative impacts that we want to fight. The first one is a negative impact on fuel consumption, and then on GHG emissions, of course, because it increases the roughness of the hull. And then the second negative impact is that it leads to introductions of invasive aquatic species, because the microorganisms stick to the hull on one side of the earth and then could be released in the ocean on a totally different part of the ocean. So EcoSubsea, thanks to its closed loop system, collects all the biological waste and contributes to lowering GHG emissions of the shipping industry. First of all, but also contributes to preventing the introduction of invasive aquatic species and then protect ocean biodiversity. So how do we measure impact of this company? First of all, we try to calculate along with the company, we found a methodology to estimate GHG emissions avoided, which is a key number for us. And also we want to work on how to measure invasive species avoided. So at the moment, the company measures the volume of biofouling collected, but it's not yet available to identify with certainty whether there were invasive species in the biofouling cleaned. But we're working with them to be able to quantify and characterize invasive species avoided, and you'll see with my second example how we could do that. And overall, actually, we also think that impact stories are key because not everything can be measured. So qualitative measurement is also key. And on the ground, there is ample evidence of the company's positive impact on biodiversity and climate. And for instance, we know that last year, a station cleaned and captured a colony of Japanese crabs in the English Channel, and it's known as an invasive species competing with native species populations. My second and last example is very different. It's a company based in the UK called Nature Metrics, and it's the world leader in environmental DNA or eDNA monitoring. The eDNA is left by organisms in the environment, in water, but also in soils. And with this technology, Nature Metrics can detect hundreds of species from just one sample for a few 100 pounds. So it's a great improvement from classic sample techniques. With this solution, Nature Metrics enable conservation organizations, corporate NGOs to assess environmental impacts at an unprecedented scale because it's much cheaper and much easier. So it contributes to democratizing biodiversity measurement, and we believe that it contributes to more transparency, more accountability, and in the end, also to redirect capital from nature negative to nature positive activities. But regarding impact measurement, it's a bit harder because Nature Metrics is data provider, so the real impact happens at their clients. So we are actually using an indirect approach to try to quantify and measure their impact. So I wrote a few examples of the KPIs we use, such as the number of clients onboarded who are measuring and reporting on biodiversity for the first time, or the number of project sites where repeat monitoring is carried out on a seasonal or annual basis. So these are examples of KPIs that show indirectly how Nature Metrics has a key impact on biodiversity through its clients. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Floriane. Are there any questions in the room to any of the participants today? Well, since I don't see any in the chat either, I think we just say thank you all for coming and have a wonderful day ahead.